All right. Well, good evening, everyone, members of council, our delegation, and the administration, and those who are fortunate to be able to stream this on a cold night at home, in the comforts of your home. Welcome to our special meeting council this evening. Roll call. All members of council are present and here. And I would like to start by acknowledging that we are on the land and surrounded by water originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties agreements between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenni Lenape treaties and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. And specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with the First Nations, our Inuit, and Métis Nation. To the members, any disclosure of community interest on the agenda is presented to you this evening. None indicated. We'll have that reflected in the minutes. Delegations. Pleased to welcome both Nancy Johnson and Graham Pressey to our meeting, and basically going to talk about the results of our economic development strategy for Tecumseh and Lakeshore. So I will then turn it over to our delegation.
Thank you. All right, did you want me to just go ahead and start? It's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, all right. Just share the screen here. Okay. All right. Everyone can see this. Can you see the screen, or is it the two slides?
I believe Sean has put it up on our screen, so he'll drive.
Okay, so you can see just okay. He's going to do the moving forward. Okay, excellent. All right. So okay, thanks very much. As said, I'm Nancy Johnston. I'm the director of strategic initiatives with McSweeney and Associates, and I'm really happy to be here. I just want to thank you for choosing McSweeney and Associates. We have a great team behind us, Ian, Eric, and Kevin, and we've all been working on this strategy together. We've started this project back in mid-October, and we had some pretty tight timelines, but we got through it, and we're here today. And I've got to say that staff has been fantastic. We worked with Marg, Chad, and Ryan from Lakeshore, and it's been really enjoyable to work with them and to learn more about your community. So we get into the background. Do you want me to move it? Okay. So just to give you a little bit about why we're hired to do this strategy. The businesses basically in the study area were pretty hard hit by COVID. Then you put out an RFP to take a look at the area and figure out different ways to support and retain existing businesses and jobs, to also encourage the greater investment and attract new business, and to also help to achieve the long-term employment growth that's required for the area. When we started, we looked at the study area, which is in red, and broke that down into sort of three different districts. We have the Tecumseh Main Street District, which is District 1. District 2 is the Lesperance South area, and Manning Road, Amy Croft area is the third district. And we broke it down because it seemed fairly obvious when we looked at it that there's three sort of unique experiences within each one of these districts. The Tecumseh Road area is more of a Main Street downtown area. The Lesperance South area is plazas, and the Manning Road, Amy Croft area is a mixed use area with residential and commercial plazas, and it's also shared between the two communities. We also looked at the economic development resources that were available in the area and looked at both the local and regional resources. The local resources being the town of Tecumseh, the municipality of Lakeshore, Intermunicipal Committee, and the Tecumseh BIA. And looking at those local resources, they're really the boots on the ground, the resources, the organizations that have that real intimate knowledge with an understanding of the business community. And then the regional organizations of Invest Windsor, which ASPEC is a part of it, Windsor Essex Regional Chamber of Commerce and Tourism, Windsor Essex, are organizations that are more regionally focused. So they really look at the county-wide area. They encompass a really large area and represent all the municipalities in the area. So they really take a high-level view of the county. There's some real synergies between all of the organizations, but we do find that the more localized strategies are really the strategies that are implemented by the local economic development offices and the BIAs. So we looked at the need for a harmonized economic development program for Tecumseh and Lakeshore, and understanding why there is a need for a harmonized economic development program. And this is obviously particularly pertinent to this specific project due to the fact that there's areas that are definitely shared. So within that harmonized economic development program, there are two objectives that we came up with. The first objective is to make economic development a long-term investment for Tecumseh and Lakeshore, and to ensure that there's long-term success for the area. So within this first objective, there's two actions, and the actions are really around having adequate resources and budget in place in both communities in order to implement this strategy. The second objective is about developing alignments and consistencies between Tecumseh and Lakeshore to support investment. So within that objective, there are 4 actions that were created, and they're around being consistent with economic development shared data, also consistency around policies and bylaws, and especially that area around the Manning Road, Amy Croft area. And also there was an action about having a complementary concierge program and pre-application process, sort of to eliminate confusion and provide kind of a seamless process. It's kind of more due to the complexity of the development processes to make it a little bit easier for developers, particularly those small developers, to be able to navigate the process. Also, there was a lot of discussion about how people really don't know where Tecumseh and where Lakeshore starts and ends. So it's sort of that shared area that if it's sort of consistent, then it'll be an easier process. So the process that we went through to create this strategy was we started with quantitative analysis and did a document review. We did a data analysis. We created a situational analysis and retail market study. The second part of the process was all about qualitative analysis, and that's where we did our consultations, including our online one-on-one interviews. We developed a score, which is strengths, challenges, opportunities, aspirations, and results. We did a business summit as well as a strategic directions and action planning session with staff. And what we ended up with is this the shared commercial economic development strategy that we are going through now. So we did do, as I said, quantitative, and that's where we did the situational analysis and retail market study. And some of the key findings from this information, or from those 2 reports, and we're looking at this is information that is combined. It's Tecumseh and Lakeshore, and we collected the data from the 2 communities and the whole of the 2 communities. So what we found as a combined Tecumseh and Lakeshore is that the area is growing. Your population is growing. You've got about 64,000 people in Tecumseh and Lakeshore right now. You've got your average age and median age is very close to the Ontario average age and median age. You have a very educated population. You have about 2,000 or two-thirds of the population with post-secondary education, which is really good. And then the labor force, your median employment income and your average employment income is quite a bit higher than the Ontario median and average, which is great. And you have a lower unemployment rate. So a lot of people are working there, so things are going well. Your household income, your household earnings. So we look at how much people will spend on shelter, and your percentage is 13%, which is quite a bit lower than Ontario at 28%. Just your single detached houses, your mix of housing, you have a fairly substantial percentage of single detached houses, which I'm sure you're aware of. And so that just gives a little bit of a limited number of housing opportunities for people, but I know that you're working on getting more investment in and different kinds of accommodation in. You also have your housing prices are a little bit lower, and then just to take a look at the top 5 sectors by industry and the top 5 sectors by occupation, and these are in order. So again, it's Tecumseh and Lakeshore. So your top 5 sectors are manufacturing, healthcare, and retail is 3rd, educational 4th, and construction 5th. And then when it's top sectors by occupation, you have sales and service trades, and then the 3rd, 4th, and 5th are business, education, and management, and that reflects the higher education that you have in your population. So out of the retail market analysis, I took some key findings, but these are just a very few number of key findings that I've added in. If you have a chance to read, or if you haven't had a chance to read the retail market analysis, please read it. If you have had a chance, that's great. There's some really good information in it, but I just wanted to pull out a few things just to sort of highlight some things. In the last 10 years, you've had 600 new jobs in the retail sector. Your residents spend on average about $31,000 per household on retail goods, which compared to Ontario is a bit more. And your residents were most likely to spend money on groceries, automobiles, purchases, or clothing. And what we found is that as pandemic has gone on and post-pandemic, the retail and service sector is changing. And some of the 2 things that really came up is that they're particularly retail, but service as well, is that they're embracing a real dual approach to commerce, looking at online as well as in-store sales. The second thing that came up was that there's a real transition from sales focus, sort of those going into the bricks and mortar store and just buying, to include an experience focused event when sales are happening. The key findings that we found through the qualitative analysis. So as I said, we did a first round of consultations, and what we did there was confidential one-on-one phone interviews, which I interviewed a number of you during that time. But there was also an online survey and that was open to the public, and then there was a virtual business summit. So throughout this stakeholder consultations, you had a really good mix of people that participated. It was sort of equal between Tecumseh and Lakeshore, and there was a real mix of regional organizations, real estate, municipal staff, elected officials, businesses, and developers that were all interviewed. The online survey was up on the Tecumseh Place Speak for about close to a month. So great input. The next thing that we did is we took all the information that we had collected and we developed a score, and the score is McSweeney SWOT. So it's, as I said, strengths, challenges, opportunity, aspirations, and results. And really what I wanted to do was just really show you the top key strengths that Tecumseh and Lakeshore have. And we talked about the population being affluent, well-educated, and growing. People talked about that community being safe and secure with a sense of community. There's a lot of new investment that's taking place in and around the study area. And the businesses there's a really good mix of anchor businesses with niche businesses. And I've got to say that there's a lot of optimism as well, and really positive, everyone was really positive when it came to talking about Tecumseh and Lakeshore. Some of your challenges, traffic flow and traffic management came right up at the top. And there was also a bit of a difficulty for safe modes of active transportation. Some areas were felt to be a little bit tired and unattractive. And then there was also the discussion about the multiple levels of government and the different policies and bylaws, and it's just more challenging to work through the municipal process. And again, this is something that we find in every community. It's not just specifically in Tecumseh and Lakeshore. It's just a complex process these days. And then the last one is just that public transit is a bit limited. So the next, so then what we did after we had gathered everything and put everything together, we came up with the strategic actions. And what we did was we sat down with staff, and we went through all the actions and made sure that all of the actions were doable and realistic, and that everybody agreed to those. And then we added those into the strategy. And so we came up with the shared commercial economic development strategy. We also came up with goals and strategic actions, and we came up with 3 goals that really stood out, really strong themes about collaborating and connecting, creating a destination, and branding, communicating, and marketing. Within each of these goals, we came up with a number of actions. So when we're looking at collaborating and connecting, we talk about the fact that it builds positive relationships, it creates a common vision, and it provides clarity for future development opportunities. So within this goal, we have 7 actions. So under the first objective, establishing a cohesive vision for the study area, it's all about creating that vision for the overall study area, and also creating sort of brands for each one of the districts. The second one, to develop a cohesive network of organizations that understand their individual and collective roles. There's a number of organizations, as we saw in the regional and local slide, and there's even more than that as well. So it's really working with those groups, defining and mapping out and communicating the roles and responsibilities of those groups in order to make sure that everyone that there's no gaps and that there's no overlap as well. The third one is about Tecumseh BIA, Tecumseh and Lakeshore working together to support and strengthen the business community. So the objectives around that are really working together to understand the roles and responsibilities of each. The same thing is really, making sure there's no overlaps and no gaps, and using resources to the best of your ability. And the second action is about exploring opportunities to collaborate and support businesses in the Amy Croft area. And then the fourth one is about improving traffic conditions to benefit the area and to support the local business. And those are really around advocating to the county to request that the county move forward with proposed improvements on Manning Road. It's also to continue to implement the Tecumseh Road CIP and to evolve that area from a commuter thoroughfare to one that really encourages walking, cycling, and micromobility. And then also to consider effective integration and service for Tecumseh Transit and the Lakeshore's future transit system. The second goal is about creating a destination and really creating this destination so it acts as the heart and soul of the community, provides an identity and creates pride and inspires uniqueness and a sense of place. So under goal 2, there are 7 actions. And those 7 actions are around the first one, creating this place that has a strong sense of community and a desirable image. That's really having the 2 municipalities collaborating on urban design guidelines to make it all look and feel the same. It's all about continuing to support and implement the Tecumseh Road CIP. And then the second one is about integrating destination, having an integrated destination to encourage active transportation options. This came up quite a bit. And it is about completing a joint Tecumseh and Lakeshore Manning Road Amy Croft urban design study. It's also about increasing residential intensification and increasing density of commercial properties as well. And then also developing bike paths and connecting the 3 districts, as well as connecting those districts with the neighboring residential areas. The third is to attract and retain residents to live, shop, and play in the study area. And it's really to look at sort of future strategic plans and make sure that there's ways in those plans to continue to attract and retain all age groups in the community and support those local businesses in the study area. And the third goal is about branding, marketing, and communicating and marketing. So it's around creating that cohesive brand, clearly communicating the 3 districts, creating shared dialogue to support the study area, and promoting the 3 districts to encourage economic investment. And this goal has 9 actions, and those 9 actions are under these objectives. So the first objective being establishing a brand and messaging that's unique to the 3 districts. And really that is just taking that established vision that's been created for the study area and then establishing clear identities and brand for each of the districts. The second one is to partner with local business organizations to support and promote local business. And that's really about investigating opportunities to improve existing marketing programs and create new ones, to work with organizations like Windsor Essex and Small Business Enterprise Center or Entrepreneurship Center, and just develop an ecosystem to help identify, support, and administer relevant grants and programs in the study area. And one of them, for example, is Digital Main Street. And the third action around that is looking at exploring the opportunity to establish a municipal accommodations tax. Oops, sorry. And then the fourth one is about the local businesses, particularly those businesses in the hard-hit retail and restaurant sector, undertake initiatives to improve their viability in today's market environment. And that's really about what I talked about earlier is having the local businesses investigate opportunities to branch out from being just solely sales focused to expanding into offering sort of that event kind of retail experience. The second one is about investigating opportunities for dual approach to businesses. So offering that opportunity to allow online as well as in-store sales. And I just wanted to mention too that all of these actions are going to be well, we've already started off with sort of the lead partners, and it's not all Tecumseh, it's not all Lakeshore that's responsible for it. There are a number of organizations, including the Tecumseh BIA and the Invest Windsor and the Small Business Enterprise Entrepreneurship Center. So that's what we have now. The next steps I will be presenting to Lakeshore Council on February 1st. We are going to be developing an implementation plan, and that implementation plan is going to be developed with staff, Marg, Chad, Ryan, and Sabrina. And what it's going to look like is it's going to be, we're going to look at each action, and then we're going to determine what the financial implications are, the timelines and responsibilities for each action. And thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions at all?
Great, thank you very much, Nancy. And then I will call upon Councillor Dowie, who has a question.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Nancy. Thank you very, very much for the presentation. And I know there are a lot of findings that you've come up with that I've thought for a long time been great ideas, and I'm looking forward to seeing that we can together with Lakeshore implement a lot of your ideas. And I think even Councillor Houston and I sit on the BIA. And I think you've actually created a good raison d'etre for them to take on, with especially focusing on that dual online and in-shop experience growth. So I want to pick up on a few items that you had mentioned, particularly in terms of perception of the ease of dealing with government. I guess was it something about, and you did mention this is something common, so maybe there's just no solution because there's health unit rules, there's fire rules, building rules, etc. At a certain point, you can't have a single streamlined system. We're just not set up that way, and we're only responsible for our sphere. But was there anything then that jumped out at you that was something that was in our wheelhouse that we could do better at? Because we don't license businesses, like we got rid of that years ago, and like I find our regulatory system is pretty limited, to be quite honest with you. So I was surprised to hear that feedback.
Yeah, it was more about it's more for the smaller developers, the smaller investors that don't understand the process, and just sort of educating them a little bit better on what happens. Like there was, an example would be, they didn't know that something was required at some point. So they felt like, oh, if I'd known up front, then I would have, been able to deal with this. Maybe they did, I don't know, but maybe there's just an opportunity to create it, just to provide them with sort of a better outline of what's going on. The larger developers understand what the process is and how long things take and that sort of thing, but it's just the smaller ones that need maybe a little bit more direction and help and support is all it is. And like I said, I know it's a really complex process. And again, the smaller investors, if you're a business person and you want to do something, that's not their that they don't do that on a regular basis. So it's just kind of getting that sort of a better idea of how things roll forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Nancy, yes, okay, Councillor Tonio, just so I don't lose my train of thought here as well, is that, and I'm sure you might have had discussions with, obviously, when you looked at the three distinct districts, and they're fairly close in proximity. One of the I find the differences is that when we're trying to put in place a destination, we want people to come in, not just our folks within our community, but from various four corners of the county and the city and so forth. The districts themselves don't accommodate that type of approach. And I think one of the things that we need is working with, you mentioned the developers and so forth, and what type of messaging. It's one thing about saying, well, here's our official plan, here's our, and so forth. But really, a lot of them come in and say, I want to do this, in the business, and we tend to, well, if it fits within our plan, it's there. So I think we need a global piece, because if we look at, for example, the Amy Crop area, Amy Crop is drive your car pick up your groceries, or go to the LCBO, pick up your wine, get in your car and go home.
Mhm.
Well, we look at what we're trying to do in the CIP area, and area number one is eventually what we want is people park your car and then walk and then and patronize the facilities and so forth. How do you see us? And I'm sure I've gotten bits and pieces of it in terms of your report. Is folks are saying, the transportation piece is we need some work. Active transportation to connecting those, we need some work, and so forth. So in your estimation, as we move on and we find a common goal, is it appropriate at this stage here to be working more with the development community and say, look, I mean, this is the idea that we're trying to put forth here, and how do we get them to basically look at a bigger, think outside of the box picture than just putting up a building and renting it out and then move on to another district?
Right. So more than just investing in the building. Well, I guess, if you have your plan and you ask, and you're asking them, I mean, it's just working together with them to say, this is what we're looking for. Will you do this as well? I think a lot of them will be responsive to that. If particularly, I mean, if you're looking at some of the smaller ones as well, the smaller developers, they would probably, I would assume, be more interested in doing that. I don't know. I don't know if you can make them do it, but at least if they understand what your vision, if you have a clear vision and they understand what that clear vision is, then you are able to sell it a bit better, I think, to get them to do what you'd like them to do.
So Nancy, then, well, first and foremost, I would think is that Lakeshore Tecumseh would have to come to some sort of a, I guess, some common ground in terms of, obviously of what we think we should achieve. So that would be probably the very first piece. Obviously, that's why we're doing what we're doing. Is I think the messaging that we have to be very, very careful, as well as what type of message we're going to be sending right to the developer. So we need to find common ground within ourselves and say, this is what we want to see within the region, right? And then once that is put in place, then it would be working with the development community and say, we're in agreement between Tecumseh and this is our vision. So in essence, we need to get those pieces of the puzzle in place, and then I guess call it a webinar or other opportunities to work with them, share our vision, and to find some common practice.
Exactly. And that's particularly too along the Manning Road, Amy Croft area, because it is a shared area. And there are, as you said, I mean, it does seem to be a lot of vehicles driving to pick up whatever, but there are a lot of there's a lot of housing and new residential going into that area. So people will be wanting to walk. They won't need to drive. They could walk. So if you can get that sort of more pedestrian friendly kind of area, then it also slows traffic down a little bit. I know you don't want traffic to go really slow, but there was a lot of discussion about the ins and outs of vehicles and how it's very congested and difficult to get around. So if you can get more people walking, that means sort of maybe less people on the road, and that would alleviate some of the traffic issues too.
Margaret had your hand up, and then I believe Rico.
Sure, and if I can just help out here a little bit through you, Your Worship, and Nancy touched on a number of the co-creation pieces throughout her presentation. She talked about creating a vision and a shared vision, so that would involve both the municipalities, but also the business owners and the development community, branding those areas, which would also be done in concert with the people affected, because we wouldn't dream of trying to do that without them and the BIA as well. And then the shared urban development guidelines, if Lakeshore and Tecumseh can agree on, having similar look and feel on both sides of the municipal boundary, that too will say a lot to the development industry about the, how council wants that to come lift off the page, if you will, and develop. So I think there are a number of recommendations and actions that Nancy's identified in the report that speak to exactly just that, Your Worship.
Yeah, and I think those are important pieces in that regard, because I think, Nancy, you alluded to the fact that Manning Road is a road, and the majority of people, they think it, when they're in Amy Croft or in Tecumseh, and vice versa. So that's the biggest piece, is that to find that common thread in terms of saying we have some common approach. Certainly from the regional perspective, would make a lot of sense, because people really can't tell us, especially folks that are coming in from Essex or Amherstburg, they wouldn't know. If you were to ask them, and I hear it all the time, and they say, "Oh my God, look at that growth in Tecumseh," and that's Lakeshore, and so forth. So that's I think is the piece, and I know that's been somewhat of an issue over the past. I only wish that region was a blank sheet and we were doing what we're doing right now. Would be absolutely marvelous, and so forth. But now it's a matter of adjusting and redressing, I guess, some of those shortfalls, and make that function as a regional entity. I think that those are, the end goals for all of us. Councilor Tonio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Nancy, have you guys considered the American market coming here shopping? Because I know prior to COVID, I did notice more and more Americans were buying groceries at our grocery store, stopping at our little shops, just for that uniqueness, and the dollar value obviously is cheaper here for them to purchase their items. Is that something that we should look at, or is it too small of an area to deal with that? That's something more for Windsor, Essex to deal with?
Well, I would think that as the areas become more established and you have those niche markets, and it's, it's the attractiveness is improving, that you can, and you have more things happening in the area, that certainly you can attract residents from the States. We didn't look at it all that closely, because I think that, first of all, you've got a large number of people to draw from, even in Essex County. So you can start with them. You've got a number of people that you can draw from just within your own area and Windsor. So start sort of more locally, and then you can always draw in Americans at some point. But I guess too, because of COVID and, who knows what's going to happen with that, let's just focus on the more local residents and get them supporting local business.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Councilor Houston, and then Councilor Althoff.
Thank you, and through you, as Councilor Dowie has mentioned, I do believe that there is an opportunity for us to leverage our BIA and what's the word here? Putting this plan into place, I don't know how the BIA fits in quite yet, but when I look at the maps, and we've got our district along Tecumseh Road, and then when we look at Manning Road, for me, Manning Road is primarily plazas, and I think the approach, and I'm not sure if it's marketing or working on a district, but I see the tactics are going to be a little bit different. And I'm even wondering in my mind how, and what can we do along our Manning Road corridor versus what Lakeshore could do in their Manning Road corridor, because it's all plaza versus the approach that we take down Tecumseh Road, which is more of a district, right? And I see quite a bit of difference there, but the marketing and the messaging and that can be the same. So I'm just wondering, seeing the different areas, what type of a different approach or how you might be able to guide us in that way, because it's more plaza versus district, or if you could just comment on that a little bit.
I think that we talked about the 3 districts all being unique and all having some really unique businesses in them, and as well they complement each other. So you're getting 3 different experiences. You get the downtown area, which Main Street area, the CIP area, which is more of a downtown area. And so it's a different experience. So if you can look at those 3 different districts and start bringing them together and creating sort of a synergy between them, then, and getting people to move around between all of them, so that, you can go and get, as was discussed, you could go to the LCBO, you can go get all your sort of big box or, your grocery shopping and all that sort of thing. It does offer something different, but, get those people that are in that area to also go over to the CIP area, so that they're not just shopping in that one place, that they understand that there's all this different shopping and all these different services in the whole area. And that if you're along Manning Road, did you know that you can go down to, the downtown area and find some different businesses. So it's just supporting them all and making sure that, and knowing that they all complement each other.
Okay, thank you.
Is that to complement the discussion, Mark? Because I know Councillor Altenoff is waiting to come on board, but go ahead.
And just to riff off of what Nancy just said and to complete maybe the answer or the thought for Councillor Houston, the one thing that we did talk about, and certainly in our focus group, we dwelled on this quite a bit, is the notion of intensification on Manning Road. And using those big parcels that maybe have had a good first run at life, but maybe need a little bit of revisioning for their next chapter, and building up the residential density in those areas to support and freshen up the look of those plazas. So while Nancy's quite right, we want the 3 to sing together. We also see a lot of potential there for inviting additional development into the Manning Road area. Thank you.
Councillor Altenoff.
Thank
Are you still Councillor Houston?
No, I'm good, thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Nancy and Graham. Thank you for the and your team. Thank you for the presentation as well as kind of the analysis undertaken. I know it's seems like there was a lot of homework done here. I really believe you've articulated your goals quite well, kind of in trying to break them down 1, 2, 3. In my mind, I'm always kind of looking for, and you note that strategic actions, and I'm seeing in the discussions that we're having now, perhaps some of these strategic actions or approach to perhaps obtain the goals are being brought out. But for myself, I think behind each of those goals, there's those strategic actions or perhaps the mechanisms that can kind of get us to hopefully achieving those goals. I guess I was hoping maybe to see in the presentation some of those, I guess, written words or some slides kind of giving a bit of guidance that may be beneficial to kind of the stakeholders or the parties involved. But I'm certainly, hearing that from the discussions we're having. So maybe if a revision, is being considered, I think something like that, because the mechanisms to get us there to those goals, I think, are really important, and something that I think, a big value that you can bring, to this reporting. As well, I would encourage you, if we can, I know I always try to say this, can we think 5, 10, 15 years in the future? You know, if we all had time machines, I think we'd like to go to the future and see what we can do and come back now. But if you can really kind of articulate, you know, perhaps opportunities, future opportunities you think really could be benefiting this lakeshore, you know, Tecumseh bridge we have here that can really strengthen and solidify that, I think that would be an awesome thing. And I know it's perhaps beyond the scope of the analysis, but I'm a firm, strong advocate for, you know, the incredible manufacturing capabilities we have in the southern part of Tecumseh. And I know that wasn't within the scope of this, but perhaps, you know, again, maybe this is future stuff, but how can we link all of this together? Because that incredible powerhouse of our manufacturing capabilities really is world renowned. It's actually awesome. If you travel to Italy, if you travel to Germany, they'll comment about, oh, some of the tool and die shops at Windsor. And I can say that because I've kind of experienced that in some of my world travels. So it's incredible how, you know, the tool and die industry or the manufacturing industry in Tecumseh is really world renowned. And I'm just wondering, I know it was outside of the work, but again, I'm always trying to perhaps push for things here. You know, is there any kind of comments, recommendations, or suggestions you might have that could, again, with these opportunities, better strengthen this Tecumseh Lakeshore, you know, opportunity? Sorry, I know it's a loaded question. But,
Well, first of all, before we go any further, this is your strategy. It's not my strategy. It's your strategy, and your community came up with it. And you know, like we said, we talked to a lot of, we went through a lot of consultations. So it's your strategy, your community, not mine. So your community has come back, and these are the things that they've talked about and said these are the things that are important to them. We asked the question about, you know, the strengths and what challenges are there and what issues are in the community. This is what they came back with. Yes, we were just looking at that that one study area, and at some point maybe you can, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to do something with the manufacturing community in Tecumseh, but we didn't look at that. We were just looking at the study area. And so also looking at that study area for, you know, over the next, you know, term of council, 5 years. So after that, you know, you build on it. So you've done the things that you've done in this strategy, and then you build on it in the next strategy so that, you know, you're always moving forward. Things don't ever stop. So you've got quite a few things to do in this. It's quite a few actions to undertake in this strategy. So don't think it's the end. It's just the beginning. So once you've done this, then you can, you know, expand and do something else.
Yeah, supplementary.
Yeah, and thank you, Worship. And I think another thing that's really important, Nancy, you are kind of articulating here, we need to initiate whatever, a kind of a process here, I'll just call it an entity, which I think is continuously evolving and continuously improving. One, I think needs to be revisited on an appropriate time basis and have, you know, input from the appropriate stakeholders. So we're seeing that continuous improvement process occur. That's really the only way this relationship is going to, you know, kind of continue to flourish and grow, is through continuous improvement. So I think that's another important part to articulate. Thank you.
And I just wanted to mention too that when we met at the intermunicipal committee last week, and both Ryan and Chad, it warmed my heart that Chad and Ryan are working so closely together. That's economic development and planning, and 2 different municipalities. And Ryan was saying, oh, you know, I talk to Chad like at least 3 times a week. And Chad was saying, you know, how much, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, you know, Chad was saying that, you know, he's learned a lot about economic development. So that in itself, you're now building that relationship again. Like you've started off with the intermunicipal committee, but staff is now working closely together as well. So I thought that was great to hear.
Sounds like a great bromance.
Exactly.
Councilor Jobin.
Okay, thank you through Mr. Mayor. So I guess it's just more of some comments than questions. So ideally we came to this, I'm just summarizing, so feel free to correct me, is because of the growth and the development in that specific area. So I do have to speak and say that we are not neglecting or not considering development in the Ward 5 industrial area. It has its own component. It's not even involved in a BIA, and there is no conflicting business or contentious matters there. We're looking at this corridor based upon the relationship of the lakeshore businesses and growth, and what we've received in communications from our residents with concerns with the roads, the traffic, what's walkable, what's not, public transportation. So for the viewers trying to understand why we're just focusing on that specific area, it's because there is an issue of growth and development and a neighboring relationship. Now, Lakeshore is relying on us for them to develop for servicing, if I'm correct. That is mostly how they're able to develop there, is they're tapping into our services of infrastructure. That's what's allowing them to grow and expand. And so we want to have a healthy relationship with them, and this is why we are doing this. And so my concern is though, and yes, we have the intermunicipal committee, which I sit on, and it goes well, there's healthy communication, but I just feel like they've already tabled one initiative with the public transportation matter, and I feel like if it's going to be a healthy relationship, it's got to be a fairness. If there's costs associated to this, it has to be a shared cost. If they're going to table it, I'd like to know what we're going to do going forward in that event. So if we're going to be neighboring and then they draw a line in the sand anyways, what I just want to make sure we're steadfast and we're going to have some results in action.
Okay. Andrew.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just I appreciate the discussion and, looking at the go forward, I guess I've got another inquiry for Nancy with respect to the perception that's out there in the community. I know in the last year, a lot of people have been indoors and maybe getting a bit more annoyed with things than they normally would be. But I did see a lot of pushback on some of our initiatives. For example, the community improvement plan. Different business owners were criticizing the design elements of our corridor. Having the high density residential, having the businesses located at the edge of the road. And it was numerous businesses that were criticizing that we were actually doing things to promote a business district in the CIP area. And I'm curious if that's just people complaining to complain, or if in your research you found a divide in the business community about the initiatives that Town Council has put forward to try and enhance the business districts.
I didn't hear that. I heard more that they didn't know what was going on. That they didn't understand, that they had heard that things were going to be happening and nothing was happening. Not that nothing was happening, but that, no, I didn't hear anything from anyone about being upset about things going on down in the CIP area.
Okay, can I probe a little bit on that? So were they speaking specifically of that the Tecumseh Road infrastructure was not being updated? Or were they not aware of grant programs that we've given for facade improvements and parking lot improvements? Or
it was just more about things that I just remember them saying, there's a few people saying that we thought this was going to happen and they were looking forward to it, and they hadn't seen anything happening. So, I mean, again, we're dealing with a few people. We're not dealing with everybody in the community, but that's what I heard in our end. So maybe that's just an education thing. When something happens, you tell them, this is what's going on.
Yeah. And so building on that, I know we have the BIA makes an effort to do some marketing of our business district and even of their associate members that are located in Lakeshore. with that, I mean, we don't have a lot of avenues for promotion. We've got, we've lost our local newspapers. The daily newspaper in Windsor doesn't really cover stuff out here unless it's controversial. We have, radio to a certain extent, but it doesn't have the kind of listenership in our area that local radio would, and others, due to how many options we have here. So I guess I've always struggled with this about how to get the word out, because what you cited is a complaint I hear, but I also see the town is making a lot of effort to get the word out, and it's people aren't listening, or they're not like, I don't know what to do to actually promote these things, because it's out there on social media. It's whatever, we used to put a lot into the newspaper, but even then people were saying we don't hear about these initiatives. And so to hear that, I'm sad a bit, because I felt that our CIP program had a pretty decent uptick. We've put out a lot of money for the facade improvements and the grants, and so I guess it pains me a bit to know that the perception is there that these things aren't actually in existence.
It wasn't around the facade program at all. It was more about the beautification, and I don't know specifically what they were saying, but not about the facade program. The facade program, is my understanding, has been doing very well, and there has been a lot of uptake on that program, and it has been pretty successful. So it wasn't around the facade program at all.
Okay, it was there, the expectation that the public works component of it would have come through by now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the other thing about just talking about the marketing, and I know it's hard, and it's particularly hard these days, and really relying on maybe newspapers and sort of that traditional kind of media maybe isn't the way to go. But I've got to say that some of the businesses that you have in the area, in all three of these districts, are really unique, and they're bringing people in from all over. And so maybe it's even just working with those businesses, and I mean, they've already got people coming from everywhere. So how do you work with those businesses to create, to talk about like their success, and getting those people that are coming to that business to go to the other businesses in the area as well. So maybe it's just looking at different ways of doing marketing rather than that traditional newspaper radio. Being creative and thinking sort of outside of the box a bit is what it has to be these days, I think.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Nancy. A lot of people that I talk to want to see the infrastructure component, the roadway, the revitalization in that one Main Street. So if they don't see anything going on, they feel nothing's getting done, and they've been talking about it. They've had these pop-up open houses that can go back 5-6 years, where even when I used to sit on the BA, that this was in infancy stage, that they felt that this was going to happen within a year or two, and now we're going to year 5, 6, 7, and it's still there. But there's been a lot of background planning, and so this year, I know it's in the budget. We've got some grant money. We're going to be doing that area near Via Rail there, that stretch. And when people start seeing that, they're going to say, oh, and then you're going to see things pick up, because the retailers are there, the apartment are being built, and then it's going to happen fast. That's all due to the fact of all this pre-planning that we've been doing, where people say nothing's happening. Then it's going to happen a lot, and you're going to see a lot of traffic. But I think it's that, like I said, the beautification, the roadway that they're used to seeing, for example, in Windsor, Wyandotte, that area there at Kildare, where they just put the road in, and it got done within 3-4 months, and they figured that that's what we were going to do. But there's a lot more to what we're planning there, and so I think it's just patience, but that will come into play. My question, Nancy, or maybe Marg, to you, in terms of our next step with the implementation plan, obviously I'm interested to know what that looks like. You still have to present to the municipality of Lakeshore, I believe. Do you have a date for that set?
February 1st.
February 1st. Okay, so I'll be
Yes.
interested to tune in to hear that discussion. And after that, you're going to receive the comments, and then there's going to be a final report coming to the town or to us together. And so I'm just trying to visualize that. And then will the town of Tecumseh and the municipal Lakeshore have a meeting together to hear the final report? Or I'm just curious on how that's going to play out. Because I do want to see us to even if there's some low hanging fruit, I want us to see us be able to put something into play that says, look, we've initiated this. We did the retail market analysis and all these reports. I don't want this to just sit and be shelved. I want us to at least agree on a couple easy low hanging fruit that we both can achieve and say, look, and then maybe build from that. So maybe if you can give me a timeline in terms of what that would look like. And obviously, like I said, the cost sharing, will that be done administratively, I believe, as part of the final report?
So maybe I can help out here if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, go ahead.
So the part of this is a little disjointed, Deputy Mayor, because of the funding arrangement. So we must get the final report endorsed, which is the ask this evening, posted to the website and satisfy the requirements of the Municipal Modernization Program Intake 2 by January 31st. Because Tecumseh was the applicant, the onus is on us to do that because it's technically, in the ministry's eyes, it's a Tecumseh undertaking. So hence Nancy is here this evening before January 31st. Her commitment to present Lakeshore isn't bound by that same date because they don't have the administrative requirements that Tecumseh does. So that's why this is a little on the disjointed side from where you may be sitting. Following that, we will do the implementation plan as Nancy has outlined in her presentation. The consultants will continue to help us with that, and we will coordinate that with Lakeshore so that we can then report back to probably first the intermunicipal committee, which is what it's there for, to do that sharing of ideas and make sure that if there are joint initiatives, we vet it through that committee before going to our respective councils. We hadn't really planned on a joint council meeting because, even if we had a joint council meeting, each municipality has to make their own decisions. And this intermunicipal committee was established to do that kind of pre-vetting between the two municipalities. So we'll circle back through that committee and then back to our respective councils with the plan for implementation, financial impact, and what we can potentially achieve in year one and then beyond.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? I just have another comment to just, I think we have something really unique here that no other region really has. They have their districts, you mentioned Deputy Mayor about Wyandotte. I mean, there's, there's Sandwich, town in Windsor. Amherstburg has their own, but we have something really unique here. We have two municipalities sharing a business district, and which other communities, don't have. And I think that we need to exploit that, I think, to its fullest. I think there's some tremendous opportunities and synergies. I think I mentioned that to you, Nancy, during the phone call. I think that's unique in itself for us. The other point I wanted to make as well is that when you looked at the agencies that are involved, like the BIA and Invest Windsor Essex and the rest of them, something has to come out of, come see BIA. They collect their funds from the businesses within their own districts, and how those districts can be married together, and because it's one thing to to put plans in play, and then but then it's the maintenance piece that comes after that, and the communications between the districts and so forth. It can't be just shouldered by the municipalities themselves, right? The businesses within that district, there has to be some sort of cooperative efforts. And I think Councillor Jobin alluded to the fact that, dollar in, dollar out, and you know, for everyone. And so I think those are, I think it's something where the BIA and the business community within the Amy Crop area will have to put their heads together and how do they can put that plan in place for the future to maintain whatever comes out of the order. The other thing I want to leave you, Nancy, as well, is that something that Councilor Tonio mentioned about, you know, the US and so forth. Years ago, I say years ago, you know, 25, 30 years ago, many families, young families from this region, they used to leave on a Friday, go to Taylor, Michigan, at the courtyard. And back then there was that big shopping place called Sam's Club. And people used to go there on a Friday night and stay there till Sunday. And so obviously the hotel was the kind of the centerpiece. We have an hotel here. And you say, yeah, we went there, and then we had family dinners at the special restaurants there, and then shopping and so forth. So tourism, it was shopping tourism, whatever you want to call it. So I think, you know, we shouldn't dismiss the fact that the Americans with the dollar advantage, there's certainly some opportunities there. And I don't think the hotel is fairly new to us. And yes, it's in Lakeshore, but it's really in, I'd say it's in Tecumseh. It benefits Tecumseh more than it does Lakeshore in that regard. It's the only difference. We don't collect the taxes, unfortunately, but I think there's some real synergies and opportunities. And I wouldn't underscore the fact that if we're trying to make this a welcoming place, you know, it shouldn't just be our own residents, which we do want them to patronize their local business because they're here 365. But we want to be attractive to other areas. So I really think that there's not so much now because of COVID and the border and all this other stuff. That's going to be in a rearview mirror, hopefully in the near future. But so that's why I look at Lakeshore Tecumseh, very unique. We share a common border in terms of the business community, and I think it needs to be fully exploited. And I wouldn't sell ourselves short and going beyond that, because we've got beautiful parks, we've got Lakewood, we've got you know, a lot of opportunities, not just for the shopping, but also other amenities within our region. Okay. So at this stage here, I want to thank you, Nancy. I think this is great dialogue, and I think it's long overdue, and you know, for us. And I think what we need to do is continue to send a message to the business community that we're open for business, and we want to work with them and make this you know, a premier, not only shopping but stopping, visiting, whatever place for us. And I think this is going to lay out the foundation that we need to get us to a point where we need to stop talking about it, and we need to start putting plans in place or action in place, you know, to get us to where we need to be. And so I'll pass it on now to our CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate and we agree. Chad and I have had a very good opportunity working with Nancy and her team, and also Lakeshore, and look forward to concluding that with the implementation plan as we just outlined. This evening, there's also a transmittal report, staff report that accompanied Nancy's, sorry, the McSweeney and Associates report, and that asks for the report to be received and the presentation as well as council's endorsement of the strategy, so that we can post it to the website and do the final reporting as per the ministry requirements for the funding. And then, of course, the third part of that recommendation is as we outlined, that we will be back to you with a detailed implementation plan for council's consideration in the near future. So if with you, at your pleasure, Mr. Mayor, if we could have that resolution before we move on to the next study, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think I think we slid right into it, Madam CAO. So I'm looking for a motion on that the CAO 2022-02 Tecumseh Lakeshore Shared Commercial Economic Development Strategy be received and adopted. Moved by Council Houston, Council Dowie supports. No further questions or comments. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried unanimous. Oh, Nancy, get those running shoes on and sharpen those pencils. Now we're at our end. We're giving you the rudder to midship and head out to Lakeshore.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks very much.
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, our second delegation and presentation this evening is our payroll business process optimization. And with us, we have Ian Shelley, the partner, and Graham Pressey, who I introduced earlier this evening, senior consultant of Blackline Consulting. Tom, you want to lead this in?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. So we're pleased tonight to have delegates from Blackline Consulting who will present their findings and recommendations from a recently completed payroll process review. So as Mayor mentioned, Ian Shelley is here along with senior consultant Graham Pressey. So we have a transmittal report similar to the previous review. So I don't know if you prefer that I go over that now or at the end. Mayor, do you have a preference?
Well, we're here. I mean,
Okay.
You know, put it up and then
Sure.
we'll go through the.
Yeah, so before they commence their presentation, then I'll just speak briefly to our report and provide an intro and some context. So during the 2021 budget process, we proposed and council approved a one-time increase to our department budget to engage a consultant service to enhance technology and automated processes with respect to our corporate financial transactions, and in particular to seek opportunities to modernize our payroll process. So subsequent to the budgetary approval, and fortunate for us, the province announced a second intake to the municipal modernization program. We did submit an application to the review stream of that program and were awarded funding to undertake this review. So we had identified the payroll process as an area of opportunity for modernization improvements during our budget process, primarily due to two factors. First, we do recognize that there are many steps in our current process that are not automated and that we feel there is potential to automate. And second, with our continued growth here at the town, we have seen an increased volume of work in payroll. And we are at the point where our existing staffing resources are at capacity. So we recognize failure to find efficiencies will soon result in a need for additional staffing resources. So we issued an RFP in July and secured the services of Blackline Consulting shortly thereafter. Blackline were able to commence the review in late September and have just recently completed this January. So before they present, I would say it is important to note that this review was focused on the payroll process itself and not necessarily in all the duties performed in payroll. And notwithstanding this focus, we did ask Blackline to provide commentary with respect to a couple of aspects of our payroll and benefits structure that differ from common practice. So I will stop there and turn the stage over to Ian and Graham, who will present their report.
Thank you, Mr. Kitsos. All right, gentlemen.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for inviting us along to present this evening. Ian Shelley, I'm partner at Blackline. I'm responsible for the work, and as you already know, Graham's with me tonight. And he's going to have the opportunity to present half of our slides to you. We have about half a dozen slides, and I'm just going to, I presume, Tom, sharing my screen is the easiest way, or do you have them? There we go, you have them already. You've done this once or twice before, I'm guessing. As an introduction to this, I have to say that choosing to go second was probably not the wise idea, because the discussion of payroll processing is certainly not as glamorous as the economic development discussion that you just had the opportunity to to have. So I will do my best, as will Graham, to make this as interesting and as engaging as we can. We can go on to the next slide, please. Graham, would you like to take us through the approach and the initial process?
Of course. Thanks very much, everyone. So very briefly, we had 3 major phases of through this project. The first phase, the discovery phase, we gathered information. This was provided by various staff members. We confirmed the various processes were in scope. So this meant that we agreed on the major activities and was used as the basis for our qualitative research, and that was interviews and job shadowing of staff. The job shadowing that we did is an activity where we sit down with staff members, and in this case it's the payroll staff, and we ask them to walk through the various processes to show it to us, so that we can actually see and experience the various activities that they're doing, and particularly with the paper processes. We conducted interviews as well with various managers and directors, and to get their perspectives on the payroll processes. When it came to analysis, we assessed the various processes, and these are the time and attendance processes. So that includes time and attendance, absences, vacations. We looked at payroll, so that's both calculating and distributing pay, calculating deductions as well. We looked at various reporting processes, so that includes annual reporting like T4s, tax forms, periodic reporting, and that's most typically in this case creating records of employment, and various maintenance processes such as updating tax tables at the end of each year. Finally, we moved along to review various common practices and look at some opportunities and recommendations for some of the issues that we identified. Next slide, please. So overall, as Tom mentioned, we did find that the payroll process is currently a high touch manual process. At the town, the payroll process and the associated time and attendance processes are performed weekly. In terms of, so the slide here is divided between what staff do and what the payroll staff do. And staff involvement typically involves paper timesheets that either they fill out or that are entered into a spreadsheet, printed out, manually approved, and provided to the payroll staff. Staff who are unionized report their time every week. Staff who are exempt typically report by exception. So if somebody is on vacation, then that would be sent in through a record of leave form. The payroll staff, when they enter it, they review and correct the timesheet for issues, and then they enter it into enter the totals into an Excel spreadsheet, and then they enter the full details of each paper timesheet into VATM, which is the ERP solution. They compare the paper version, the spreadsheet, and what's in VATM for errors and correct that. Records of leave are a paper form used throughout the town to record vacations, sick days, and other sort of leave from the job. It's a paper form. It's manually approved. It's tracked by managers, and so if somebody's on vacation, if somebody's off sick, or if there's another leave, they're filling it out. It's going to the manager, and then from that, it's brought into to the payroll staff who enter, record, and track leaves and absences in an Excel spreadsheet. In terms of distributing payroll, that is done electronically. Staff receive their pay slips through email, but payment is given by direct deposit. However, there still are some manual involvement with the payroll process, including comparing the totals to Excel, making various adjustments for some issues, and particularly doing a large amount of checking to ensure that the correct totals are being used. When it comes to the various vacation and leave entitlements, as mentioned for the leaves, this is tracked in Excel spreadsheets. Some managers separately track their staff's vacation entitlements as well. Because it's tracked in an Excel spreadsheet, staff and managers aren't always aware of how much vacation time that they have available at any given point. The payroll staff calculate outstanding vacations 3 times a year, distribute that to everyone, but that's a pretty involved process, and it's not in real time. So the next slide, please. So we reviewed the various.
Let me pick up here, and I'll
Yep.
take it forward. I want to emphasize to council that this is an essential process, payroll, not glamorous but essential. And really what's there at the moment is highly manual. We've got paper timesheets being rekeyed into the system, which is error prone. It's being keyed twice so that we have an error checking mechanism. And then there's a whole raft of manual calculations, whether that's OMA's contributions, whether that's adjustments for one-time payments. These are all calculated and checked in Excel again. And this is largely occupying almost a full-time employee's time of each week of going through this process. So there's lots of risk of errors through this process and lots of error checking that's been put in place to try and avoid payroll errors, which are obviously one of those transactions that people are less tolerant of errors occurring within. It's a technical term in how we talk about it, but there's lots of motion. There's lots of things physically moving around the organization. There's timesheets being filled in and passed to managers who are signing in and returning. Those timesheets are being physically moved to payroll to be reviewed and added in. So there's lots of unnecessary movement happening, which is a little bit of error, a little bit of effort and potentially a source of error and loss through that. And then there's increased workload. A timesheet's filled in and it's rekeyed twice. So every timesheet is captured in a different format 3 times. I've talked already about the number of error checks that are run to make sure that this re-entering of data doesn't introduce errors. So on top of having to rekey it, we're then checking that we didn't rekey it erroneously. There's a few elements in there of calculations. We talked about OMA's balances. We talked about one-time payments, where it appears that the calculations that are in the system are not quite correct at the moment. And so there are outside sheets to do that. So there is a substantial increased workload here from the way the process is set up at the moment. And I'm sure in the mention of a paper timesheet, hopefully everyone is aghast at the idea in this day and age that people are still handwriting on timesheets a lot of the time. So in terms of what the challenges are, it really starts with that paper timesheet and it flows all the way through the process then until we actually get, even though this was titled payroll, till we get to the payroll point of the process, where that is largely electronic, and apart from the calculation and adjustments that need to be done, that represents generally common practice. Can you take the next slide, please? So in looking at this, I mean, I won't go into the details of each of the recommendations, but we put forward 4 overarching recommendations. And the first one is the time capture system. And what we're suggesting there is effectively all staff will capture their own time in an electronic system at the point. Now, there are ways to do this. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be every staff member. It could be a lead hand or a supervisor doing it. But we want at the point of capture staff to put it in electronically. There's a interesting side effect to this. Actually, we'll go on to the next one for that point. We've commented on an employee portal. What you commonly see with these time capture solutions is that you have your own area, you put your time in, and you can go back there and look at things like, what are my balances? How much vacation have I used? How much bank time do I have? And I think that's a key element of any time capture system that Tecumseh goes out to try and acquire. The second point of this is reporting electronically. Now, this is a function of the time capture system, but if you think of the profile of staff, the office-based staff who are sat at a desk are largely reporting on exception, and that's a great space to be at. Not all municipalities are doing that, are saying, we have a bunch of employees who work a standard work week. Why are we asking them to fill in timesheets every week? You're not doing that. You're doing it by exception. But they're the people that have ready access to the technology. So when you think about the staff that are actually filling in the timesheets, they typically have less access to the technology. And so there will need to be some thought put into how you give them access to that technology. And there's some great alternatives out there. I mean, it could be as simple as a card entry system on a building. If it was recreation, as you go into the building, you swipe in. There are mobile apps that geolocate. So as you go in, it's like clocking in, and it puts the geolocation to say, I was here at this time. It could be tablets in vehicles so that public works staff can be noting down. So there's lots of technology options to give access, but it's something that needs considered thought for the profile of work the staff are doing. Third recommendation is around workflows. This is the idea that once you've submitted that timesheet electronically, whoever needs to approve it gets it electronically and gets told it's now time for approval. There's one thing that's happening at the moment is there's I feel an over-reliance on payroll staff to check that what's being coded on the timesheets is correct. And that really, I feel, should be pushed back down to staff and managers to say, you should be checking that the time is correct and it's coded to the correct place. It shouldn't, if the municipality was twice as large or 3 times as large, it really wouldn't be feasible for the payroll people to understand that level of information. At the size it is, it's about feasible, but that responsibility really should go back to the managers and the staff to make sure they're coding their time correctly as it comes in. And the final piece of this is you have a solution. It's called VDIM. It's the finance solution that's running the payroll processes. And there do seem to be examples of what I would consider relatively standard calculations a finance system should do that it doesn't seem to be doing correctly. So on top of adding some new elements to this to allow electronic time capture, we think some investigations needed of those configurations in VDIM to confirm that they are being correctly done. And we often find that as you upgrade through versions, if the testing isn't done adequately through those upgrades or those patches, then some of these type of inconsistencies can be introduced. So we're fairly confident there are configuration changes that can happen to VDIM to correct that. So overall, with these recommendations, what it achieves is it takes away the role in payroll today of entering timesheets, checking timesheets, confirming timesheets. That whole piece of work would disappear because the time capture integrated with VDIM would automatically do that. Staff would enter time once, managers would review and approve, and it would be entered into the system for payroll then to do its proper job. We've talked about pushing down responsibility for checking. And so elimination of all of the error checking reports that are in there at the moment. There's about 3 points of error checking. And then finally with the VDIM, elimination of many of the manual adjustments that happen. And if it was possible, and it certainly is possible, to move to the employee portal, then the idea of real-time access to banks and vacation reports so that staff know where they are, managers can make decisions on approvals. Do I approve this vacation or not? I've got access real time to what's available to the employees. So 4 relatively straightforward recommendations to say. I will comment that they won't be straightforward to implement. There is a huge amount of complexity in municipal work and municipal collective agreements around timekeeping and time reporting. And it is a difficult subject. So that first bullet, there's 5 words that say adopt a time capture system. I wouldn't want you to underestimate the involvement that takes. There are certainly products in the market, and there's certainly vendors that commonly work in municipalities, but there is always complexity, and often in our experience, as I mentioned, driven by the terms of the collective agreement. We have one last slide to talk on. Not directly within our scope, we were focused on the payroll process, but as Tom introduced, there were a couple of items that staff were aware of, and we certainly commented on, that are less common in municipalities and a lot less common. And the first one was pay frequency. Right now, you're in what's referred to as a weekly current pay cycle, which means basically on Tuesday, and we'll talk about timesheets arrive, and the process to pay is begun to pay for the week that you're in. So on Friday, you're paid for the Monday to Friday of that week. And what we see largely in the vast majority of other municipalities is a bi-weekly in arrears. that you would submit your timesheet and you would be paid at a later date, and you would be paid every 2 weeks. And so that's certainly, we're highlighting it. We're not in a position to directly recommend it in our review, but we're highlighting there could certainly be some workload benefits. It's probably oversimplistic to say it would halve the workload going from paid weekly to paid every 2 weeks, but I certainly think there could be a 25 to 35% reduction in workload just from that change. You can introduce some difficulties with the weekly current as well, is if there are discrepancies between the timesheet submitted on the Tuesday and the work that was done by the Friday. If somebody fell ill or that sort of thing. So you do add some potential rework that's needed as well. So I think there's a substantial, that change on its own could provide a substantial improvement in the workload. And then the second piece is the payroll person, and I suspect largely a function of the size, is currently doing the benefit administration. And that's, again, something we don't see commonly. We commonly see payroll being the pay the salary function, a finance almost function, and the benefits administration firmly within the HR department, as they typically have established the benefits program. They commonly have relationships with the benefits provider, and it addresses any concerns there might be with privacy of personal information, with HR having that responsibility for retaining privacy of personal information already. You're pushing all of that administration activity under an organization already carries that responsibility. So again, not a recommendation, but an observation and some commentary around common practice around payroll. That was a fairly rapid run through of an administrative and slightly dense process. So I will take a pause there and ask for questions.
All right, thank you very much, both Ian and Graham. I believe I have Councillor Jobin.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Ian. Thank you for the information. I just have a couple things. So costs always, and again, it would determine what direction we want to go. But in the event that staff are more accustomed to the 1 week pay process or period, what would you have a questionnaire to the employees? And isn't there some form of agreement when you have union and non-union how pay is done? So we'd have to formalize a policy. And what if the majority of the staff, because we have some for long-term employees, don't want to adjust to a 2-year pay system?
Agreed. I know, and we did make, as I commented, I wouldn't say this was a recommendation as much as an observation. It's something for the municipality to contemplate the benefits. Certainly, to make any changes would be a negotiated event. You would need to talk to all staff around the changes. We did comment in the report that part of the transition is something the municipality might want to consider smoothing, and there could be options of how you allow, how you move the employees from a current weekly to a bi-weekly in arrears, and provide some forms of financial support for that transition, whether that's an extended loan or a loan that's repaid at the end of employment or something. I mean, I'm sure there's many options that can be explored, but I certainly would completely agree with you that it's a negotiated discussion to understand people's perspective on that. But I often feel with these, it should be a discussion that does highlight what the benefits overall are. I mean, once the transition has been completed, I think for many people, it wouldn't be a huge difference when you're through the transition period and you're back into a new steady state of working, but through discussion only and understanding that, the various perspectives and the benefits to the municipality of doing it. So as I want to emphasize again, we haven't made it as a firm recommendation, just a clear observation that it's a big difference to how the sector generally operates.
Okay, thank you. And typically, what do programs cost? Again, what would be like the lower scale cost to a higher end system?
There's a few elements to this, and we are working at the moment on behalf of management to put together a more formal costing around this. So rather than quoting numbers now, if I can make a commitment that management is looking into this, so they'll bring forward a more definitive. But the elements we've put forward, that there is certainly a labour cost, if you like, from the VDIM changes that you would have to take on. And that would be at, almost an hourly rate. So a number of hours of a consultant to bring in to look at that. So I don't expect that to be an excessive amount because it's configuration, but 20, 40, 60 hours of labor is probably in there. On the time capture system, you're a smaller municipality, and the challenge you face there is you would tend to allocate a smaller budget, but your problem's as complex as a larger municipality. Just because you have a smaller population doesn't mean you're doing any less complex time tracking. So unfortunately on that, I think you're going to find that, per capita, it's a larger cost than you might feel, it was warranted, but it does come down to complexity and economies in scale. So if it's okay at this point, we are working on some of those numbers to help management cost out a proposal in future. I do know, as with this project, the Municipal Modernization Fund is now, it is certainly offering grants to allow municipalities to take forward these recommendations and implement them. And I've just heard this evening that one of the other municipalities they're working with on a similar project has received approval to that grant to go and get the implementation. So price tag aside, there are routes for you to carry on with this through the Municipal Modernization Fund.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Dowie and Deputy Mayor Bichetti.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Ian, thank you for the presentation. I know I have the privilege or maybe what's the opposite? Privilege or detriment of having gone through a payroll process review with my employer. I guess what I see is, ultimately as an employee, I have ready access to that information about my banks, my hours, it's very easy for me to see everything that I need to see. So I'd say I value it as an employee. Corporately, I look at the investment and the manpower needed to implement it, and I guess I don't know if it was worth it, given the expenditure to get there and what the deliverable was at the end of the day. So I guess my burning question is whether this is something that is that is sufficiently ambitious for a municipality our size, that it could be done in a value prudent way, or if this is something that might be better to do as part of a consolidation or a consolidated IT HR strategy with our neighboring municipalities, so that the risks and the development costs are not completely borne by our municipality. And I did see in the administrative report too that there was some uncertainty as to the interoperability of the different programs with the enterprise software we've already purchased.
I've not had this discussion with management, so I'm slightly off script with the response, and I hope that will be respected by management. I would 100% agree with you. It's frustrating to us as an organization that we deal with municipalities who are constantly unwilling to collaborate on technology, and yet at the end of the day are all in an identical business. So I would 100% agree with you that there is opportunities to get that scale economy by working with neighbors. And time and attendance is such a core process that everyone does. The slight caveat to that comes the collective agreement and what the terms of the collective agreement are and what constraints that puts on you. I think something like an accounts payable process is probably an even better candidate for collaboration. It's obviously way off scope, but that doesn't have those sort of restrictions. So I would 100% agree with the idea of looking for collaboration opportunities to get that scale economy and reduce the unit cost if you possibly can, but keeping in mind that there are artificial uniquenesses that are brought in through the collective agreements.
Okay, thank you very much. And just I wanted to maybe explore a little bit with, I guess the benefits that are to the organization that having such a process would deliver. I mean, I'm thinking, short term, there's going to be a big capital cost to get there. certainly the time spent to bring us on board. But is there a point in time when, beyond just the ease of getting the information and the, you're freeing up time from your management from doing these duties, is there a notable, or what's the type of return we would see in 10 years, let's say, of having adopted this a system like this in terms of productivity savings for the municipality? Or would you have anything like any kind of metrics that could be brought forward?
So I think at the crux of your question, for me, apart from the benefit side of it, is that why are we doing the time and attendance piece at all? And if that's deemed to be valuable, then the question for me is, well, how do we do that most efficiently? And I certainly think through some of the recommendations we're making would see labor savings in the region of half to 1 FTE is our estimate at the moment, ongoing. And so if it's deemed that doing time and attendance reporting is valuable, I certainly think this is a more efficient way that would pay for itself over the long term. Is it a strategic process that's going to enable many other things to happen? In some respects, no. It's an administrative process that some would argue, as I said, we just have to do. So what's the most efficient, cost-effective way of doing it? I wouldn't present, that this gives you opportunities for many other things. That said, once you have the electronic data, then you can start to get information out of it. And I certainly think that one of the areas that you may look into in the medium-term future could be things like job costing. How much time are we spending on these jobs, on these public work items, those sorts of things. So getting that data electronically, I think, is the potential future value that you can look into and explore to see whether you're able to better understand how you work and use that data to drive decisions about how you operate. So the crux of it for me is, do we need time reporting? And if the answer is yes, what's the most efficient? And I think you'll find that putting in these systems to automate it and relieve staff time to do other value-added activities would be the decision you want to go and make. And then future opportunities would be around how we use that data to better understand how we operate and make better decisions. But I don't think this is a transformational process for the organization. It's an incremental improvement process.
Thank you very much.
Before I go to you, Deputy Mayor, just so on Councillor Dow's comment about the synergies and looking at partnering with other municipalities and that in your discussions, as well as one of the concerns that I would have in particular, I totally agree with the HR component of it and safeguarding confidential information and so forth. I think it makes absolutely good sense. Having said that, as well, is that I would feel comfortable or uncomfortable partnering with another community, depending on the cybersecurity opportunities. And I know what we have, but I don't know what they have. And so is there any thought, in terms of the more, and I get the whole concept here, time is money, and the more time you can reduce and achieve the goal is the end result that we're all looking for. And for me, we need to move away from Ebenezer Scrooge in the ledger, and then look at obviously advancements and payroll as we're trying to do right now. So any thought, Ian, in terms of on that as well, is that would be, maybe I'm just blowing smoke here, I don't know, but to me, I'd have concerns, especially with knowing what's happened in other communities. It has happened. They've been under attack, and it's cost them very dearly, and so forth. So safeguarding information is first and foremost. And I know we have our IT director here is very conscious of that, and so is administration. But any thought in terms of in looking at partnering with other communities? I know that private sector, I mean, they contract out payroll with other communities, but then the cybersecurity piece is also a part of the package.
So I think the fact that it's front and center of your mind gets you 50% of the way there to begin with. I think the cybersecurity issue comes from not paying attention to it as much as anything. So working with other municipalities and going in with that as part of the discussion, I think gets you a long way to the solution. Everyone's facing the same risks. You know, there may be profile differences between who's, you know, threats are focused on, but we've seen, as you've highlighted in the last few years, that small municipalities are as at risk as medium-sized and large municipalities in this province. So I think the fact that it's on the agenda and you've addressed it internally would put you in a good position going into any discussion to determine whether that was a real prevalent threat or not, and whether it could be mitigated and whether your partner has a similar posture. Overall, you know, there are structures that are as robust as you feel at the moment, and certainly, I think that, as I say, I think the fact that it's on your agenda, you would consider it going in, and you could determine for yourselves whether it's, you know, it's an adequate relationship or not, or whether there are residual risks that you're uncomfortable with. So beyond, you know, beyond knowing, you know, beyond getting into the discussion of the specifics in another municipality, I don't think I can say more than you're attenuated to it, and that's the best posture to have.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Katie.
Thank you, Mayor. If you ask any school principal where their money goes in budget-wise, 75% I would easily say goes towards technology. And with the pandemic and Chromebooks for students, we have to keep up, and it's an expensive thing to do. And so even as a municipality or a town, we have to look at that there's going to be a cost to technology. And I agree. I thought at first, can we share? But I know our director, Mr. Firth, he's done in the past. I remember him coming back with certain software programs, or and again, whether it be GIS, he would be able to you know, engage other municipalities in the region and perhaps do some savings in overall price. So there may be those possibilities, but I agree with the mayor. We have to be careful with, you know, in terms of sharing the actual service. I think I'd rather be a standalone and take care of our own needs in HR and in terms of finance and accounting, because not every municipality is going to be at the same page. Some may not give any value to this, you know, initiative, whereas we may, and so we're going to, you know, hit a wall there. So I think if we believe in technology and we know, you know, future wise, you know, the youth, they're all about technology. They're going to be getting into the workforce, and, you know, when they come into the town, when you look at your paycheck, even at the Board of Education, we have an employee portal. And like Councillor Dowie said, you can easily see how many sick days you've taken. Your checks are all online. It's like you scroll through it and it's amazing. And that benefit alone, I think as an employee, you're going to value. So yes, there will be a cost. I think it's a cost that we need to put in place because it is the future, and it's going to make everyone more efficient, whether it be administratively, employees, but also accountability. As directors, they're going to know when a manager wants to take time off for sick days, it's all on paper. It's a click of a button, accessible to the senior administration. So I totally support that. And again, you know, I'll leave it with the director. I know Mr. Firth's done in the past where there could be possibility where other municipalities can say, look, you know, can we pitch in and put a proposal and maybe get the cost reduced if there's more municipalities that buy into it at the same time. And so those are the things I think, you know, we could probably explore.
Okay, Mr. Firth, and then Councillor Altenhoff.
Just very briefly, through your worship, to the Deputy Mayor, and just a conversation about synergies with other municipalities, as the Deputy Mayor alluded to, that is always something that we look at. We have a tight group here in the region that have benefited from those relationships in the past, and we'll continue to look at those. And secondly, our financial software and our ERP is already accommodated for in our life cycle budget. So we're about 10-ish years into that, and the Director of Finance can speak more clearly to that, but it is something that is dovetailing nicely into our current digital strategy that's underway. So this whole topic of replacement of the financial solution and bolting on other products to that solution is something that's being actively discussed in the digital strategy. And it's something that'll be brought back to council in February when we present that study. But it is a component of that study that is underway and will be addressed in that as well. And but rest assured, there are dollars that are put away in life cycle because we benefit from our life cycle budgeting that we implemented many years ago. And this is one line item in that life cycle budget for IT. That a substantial line item, probably one of the biggest, is our financial solution. So just wanted to update council on just those two items quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Altno.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Ian and Graham. Thank you for the presentation. I think I have a comment and a question, but first a comment, and I think it was somewhat responded to by Councillor Dowie, but I think if there was a revision to this presentation, I would really like to see, following your recommendations, really what's the cost, and I recognize it's only an approximation, but what's the potential cost benefit of implementing such recommendations? I know, Ian, you try to kind of equate it to a full-time equivalent and so forth, and I think that's perhaps very good, just to give us kind of the decision makers on what's the potential financial benefit we could see. I know it's hard to foresee everything. I understand that because once you start looking into it a little bit further, perhaps the numbers get a little bit larger. But I think something to help us make that decision would be appropriate. The question I have would be with regards to kind of this electronic recording. I know we already have a lot of that technology, well, let me not say recording, but we have technology implemented. From your job shadowing, was it evident to you, do we have things in place that could perhaps quickly be kind of reconfigured to allow for implementation into a more of an electronic type recording and reviewing of the hours and so forth?
So from our shadowing, we did not witness something that was specifically suitable to the job. And I would caveat that we're asking people to show us what they do now, not what they could possibly do. So I would have to sort of pass the question back to management to some extent to ask whether there was something we didn't see that would be suitable. I suspect the answer remains no. When it comes to VADIM, which is your finance system, we are aware that certain versions of VADIM do have some time capture functionality, but we know from other clients that they've chosen not to use it because it hasn't worked for them either. So at this point, I would say from what I'm aware of, VADIM is the system that may have some functionality, but from other clients, they have not used it for this because they have found it does not meet other municipal clients, it doesn't meet their needs. But in terms of whether there is other technologies we didn't witness, I'd have to refer that back to management, but I think likely no.
Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a couple of questions. Councillor Dowie did ask most of them and clarified any questions that I had. I guess a comment that, I think the presentation has allowed us to really view and see everything that goes on within the function of payroll. I wasn't aware, and people always find out when it doesn't show up, right, that there's an issue. So thank you. And I guess just going through this process gives us a little more understanding of the process that our team is going through to deliver that weekly. I see a big opportunity for us to modernize this function for sure, and private sector, public sector, we both all have unions, time, people that are hourly, people that are salary. So I think the core function, right, across the board is being done out there, and I think we can certainly learn, and there's a way that we can modernize this and do it with, our neighbors and do it efficient. So, I look forward to seeing, what could come of this, how we can make it as efficient as possible within, some of the constraints that we have. So thanks for the information and look forward to seeing where this can go.
Okay, any further questions on it? I can say that the county of Essex did go to more electronic payroll. I can tell you, I'll show you right here. You can look on the screen. This is how I used to track my time and my pay, right here in a piece of paper. And I don't know how many corrections. And then Deputy Mayor, I think we were on that voucher when you certainly came on. Now the beauty is that 5 digits, anywhere from my iPhone or whatever, and I get all my information, from how much income tax I'm paying, my UIC, everything, all my times, my meetings, everything is just boom, it's there. So does it save time? Absolutely. Under this, it used to take 3 people to do this: myself, my assistant here, and my assistant at the county. Now it's basically, as my meetings are into my calendar, it automatically goes in. So you can see from the employees the same. They can track their vacation, their stats, everything. And so that to me is money in the bank. That's what I call it. And to your point, Deputy Mayor, we were the first municipality to go paperless. We were, there's so much in the electronic piece that we did. We were trailblazers, and on the payroll, we're a little behind in dealing with that. And quite honestly, I'm a little surprised in terms of the tracking, obviously, of very important information. Confidential information. And I think the separation and HR department through my past career, HR managed all of that from, all of our fringe benefits, pension, and all of our healthcare issues and so forth were all done there and so forth. And I think there should be a separation. I think we're on the right track. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask our treasurer, who is responsible to make sure that we all get paid timely and accuracy. And maybe you can give us a little background. I would ask if you can do that in about 2 or 3 minutes, so Mr. Kitsos, in terms of difficulties and what benefit that you see by moving into a more modern payroll system.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I can say that we are optimistic when we think of this type of practice or this type of endeavor. Our interest in finance, I can say, when we completed this application, we were looking for things that did not add value, and we were looking for opportunities. We already know there are things that can add value that we just don't have the time to do, or we don't have the software or the capacity to do as well. So, one item that was mentioned was job costing. So within our current financial system, we do have job codes, but it is difficult to extract that information. And that's just a simple example that, we go to the effort to make these codes, people are tracking it, and then at the end of the day, it's very difficult for us to get that information out. And it could be a configuration issue. It could be something that could be fixed. It might not be. So that's our first challenge, is really to see, what can our existing software do, and if we can't make changes to improve it, then we have to look at other opportunities. I will say that when I started here at the town, I think it was a year into it, is when we went to our new software, is when we changed over software, and we chose to go to an enterprise solution. So there are advantages and disadvantages to that. And there's a lot of pieces, as Ian had alluded to, that, these, the recommendations are intuitive, but they're not easy to implement. That said, we are optimistic. We would like to explore them. That's, our interest is to do things efficiently. Those are the things we think about all the time. So it does bother us if we, if we're rekeying things twice, or we're preparing things that we think should be automated or could be automated. We do know that there's no silver bullet out there. We have done some early research. We've talked to municipalities, neighboring municipalities that have implemented time and attendance. So we know it's a big task. It does involve everyone. And at the end of the day, sometimes there can be workarounds. I'll say ultimately our goal is we want to do this right. And we want to, we have to take into consideration all the other pieces that fit into our financial software. We'll have to work very closely, obviously, with IT to see, what our best opportunities or solutions are. So, we are excited about it because we want to, there's a lot of things that we would prefer to do rather than keying data. We'd rather spend more time analyzing and costing. And we know that creates more value. So, we see it, it's obvious from this report, everyone sees that there's opportunities. We see it every day. The challenge is it's not an easy fix. But that said, and it is something that we are very interested in pursuing, and engaging our consultants for this exercise. We anticipated what the recommendations might look like, but the benefit here is having consultants who have seen our software in other municipalities. They can provide a little bit of insight into how difficult or how we might prioritize these recommendations. And they've highlighted it's things that that we suspected might be an issue, but I think it's important for us to investigate really our software capabilities that we have right now, to see what is out there and how we can improve, and to implement a solution that will benefit. It's going to improve the workload here, but also improve the outputs that we can get.
So it sounds to me it's basically the more intense manually keying work that's being done, a greater chance of error and duplications are in existence. Would I be correct in saying that?
Oh yeah, that's always the case. Yep, you don't want to handle things twice if you can avoid it. So that's definitely something that always raises a flag. As I mentioned, it's not always an easy solution, an easy fix, but it's something definitely that we would strive for, and that that is the ultimate goal, is to handle something once.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kitsos. I think this is we need to hear from the folks that have to deal with the work on a daily basis. I think it's critical. Any further questions or comments? I hear none. And so I'm going to look at Marg. What do we need from council tonight to receive the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, this is another carbon copy almost of the recommendation from the first report. To receive it, yes, indeed. Also to endorse it and so that it can be posted to our website in order to meet our funding obligations. And then I believe Mr. Kitsos has also included a third part of the recommendation to come back to council with an implementation plan or some recommendations regarding implementation for further consideration. All
right. So I'll look at Ms. Moy. You got that all set up. Okay. I need a mover and seconder on the report. Councilor Houston, move. Councilor Jobin, support. All in favor? Oppose, if any. That is carried. Again, thank you very much, both Ian and Graham, on your presentation. And we're looking forward to Mr. Kitsos when you bring back that report, for action in the near future. So with that, again, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Council.
And administration. No further, I don't believe we have any further business to deal with this evening, so, okay, we got some more.
Very quickly, if I could, Mr. Mayor, and just while we have, we're streaming live, it's just to remind everyone, including the viewers at home, that the Tech Online public engagement for the town's digital strategy is tomorrow evening, Thursday, January 27th, from 6:30 p.m. until 8 p.m. It's not too late to register. The details are on www.tecumseh.ca. And, encourage your friends and neighbors as well. This is all about serving you better through an online environment. So we appreciate anyone who has some time and some thoughts to come and participate. Thanks so much for my infomercial.
All right, well, thank you very much, Madam CEO. So no further business, I don't think. We're all good. Then adjournment is certainly in order. Councillor Altenhoff and Councillor Tonio. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, members of council, administration, and again, for our viewing audience, thank you for streaming. And until next time, bid you good night.